Hello, Taylor Elwood here, and welcome to a live stream here where I'm talking about Saturn work and inner alchemical work. I've been doing a lot of Saturn work lately, and it's been kind of interesting. One of the books that I'm reading right now is called Saturn in Transit by Aaron Sullivan. Highly recommend it. One of the things that I find interesting about Saturn work is that when you work with the planet Saturn, Saturn shows up in your specific houses for you, and those houses kind of tell you what you need to work on. In my case, my house is in Leo, and what they say about Saturn in Leo is tragic flaw, extreme awareness of the ego and its power, such that when the ego is undergoing a natural process of death or change, Saturn in Leo thinks the entity of the greater self is flawed and it becomes ashamed. Worst fear, that others are acutely aware of one's flaws and will shame one for them. That one's creative side will go unrecognized or worse, be mocked. Cure, practice not caring what others think and look deeply within for the satisfaction and praise that is so necessary. Out of that will come the steadfast heart, the steady light. Well, I can safely tell you that hits me to a T throughout my life. I've dealt with the demon of recognition. Part of that is family history, but part of it is definitely the Saturnic aspect of Saturn and Leo. And part of it has definitely been a thing of creative ego as well. And it's interesting because I'd say in the last few years, I was able to finally strip away that need to be recognized and let go of a lot of that ego. But I would say, like, even now, my journey with Saturn is continuing because I'm doing all this self-love work. Well, why am I doing it? Well, in large part because I've spent so much of my life seeking validation from other people. And ultimately, really, I've come to a certain point where I realize that just doesn't work. Now, all people go through this to some degree, but I think what's relevant about this, and what I'm sharing here really, is that if you do your astrological chart and you check at where Saturn is, so Saturn might not be in Leo for you. Saturn might be in Taurus or somewhere else. That can give you an idea of the work you need to be doing within yourself. The work around how you need to transform your soul. For me, creatively, it was learning not to care so much about what other people thought and to just go do my own thing. And to really just accept that I have my own unique vision and everything else, and to be empowered with that. And for me, it's also based around this journey of self-love. So there's a lot of inner alchemical work in terms of Saturn work. And I share that because I think it's really relevant and important with this kind of stuff. And then we also have this other aspect of Saturn work where that I was just reading today. And here's what the author says. The author says, the crisis of transformation is one that embodies all the elements of heroism, but particularly the unconscious reenactment of an original act by some unknown yet strangely intimate character. The anxiety that Iliad refers to is in fact a highly specialized alert system sent from the psyche to interrupt mindless actions and repetitive habits that prevent growth, which in turn provokes a need to locate this uncomfortable feeling and find its source. Anxiety is a foreshadowing of transformation. Well, I think there's a lot of truth to that. Xander, you say that Saturn has become very important to you in the last few years. Yeah, I don't get tired of the outer planets either. And yeah, Saturn has been very important to me for that same reason. I think a lot of the tendency to view Saturn as a malefic force and also the other outer planets is really a drawback in a lot of ways that prevents people from seeing how this force is actually a very powerful and potent way to change your life. I mean, if we look at Saturn, Saturn is the merger of the known and the unknown, the unconscious and the conscious. It's the bringing together of things. For me, I'm doing a lot of work around this work of self-love, and I'm really coming into this place from an unknown place. And a lot of the transformations that I'm going through in my life right now are examples of this, where I'm encountering, the anxiety of the transformation itself, but it is really a foreshadow of, yes, you're going into the unknown. What you've known doesn't work. What is in the unknown may work. You don't know. There's no guarantee, but at least you can go into it and discover it. And that's kind of what this whole Saturn work is about for me. And I share that because I think a lot of times when we take on a different perspective and view it, it can help us transform our lives. So for me, reading this book on Saturn in transit has been really helpful, and I highly recommend it to any of you out there, because I think you can get a lot of insights as to how Saturn shows up and how you would really want to work with Saturn in a very knowing way. And speaking as someone who is 46 and therefore kind of in the kind of toward the tail end, I hope, of my midlife crisis, Saturn is the is basically kind of like a huge embodiment of that. There's Saturn aspects that come into play. Xander, you said, after acknowledging my shadow self, I realized what people call dark aspects aren't dark for me. Yeah, well, that's just it. They aren't necessarily dark. They just require us to shine the light on them. And if we pull the shadow out, that's where we can discover the gold. So for me, I'm finding that doing this Saturnic work is helping me pull the shadow into the gold. Doing this alchemical work, doing this very real, deep process is transformative. It's Saturnic, and yet it's also it calls upon me to see my limits and boundaries, the areas where I perhaps lack imagination or creativity, or the areas where I have limited myself, and it calls on me to open myself up to them and embrace and embody the opportunity for discovery. So I wanted to share that with you. That's kind of some of the work that I'm doing right now with the Saturn work, and I thought it would be interesting because I think a lot of times people don't talk about this, but this is important work. This is how we transform our lives. And speaking as someone who's going through some different transformations in my life and has been going through them, I can safely say that as I'm coming out the other end, I've had a lot of my illusions and delusions stripped away. I see myself in a different light. I still have a ways to go, and I'm definitely not. I'm a very fallible person in a lot of ways. I know this because of the challenges that I have at times. But I mean, that's just part of life. It's what we do with it and how we challenge ourselves to grow that makes it matter. And that's what I'm doing. But Saturn can be a great teacher in that regard. Saturn shows you where you are limiting yourself and where there are opportunities for healing and growth, and also liberation from the previous limits and boundaries that have held you in place. The ones that you've put on yourself and the ones others have put on you. All right. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.